Hi, so today we continue discussing the marketing. So today I'd like you to be able to define and apply some very important concepts such as 4P. So today we're going to discuss a holistic, a very applicable and very handy approach in marketing that is called 4P. And then we'll talk about these 4P, which stands for product, pricing, promotion, and place in detail. And distribution channels is about places. So we're gonna look at this 4P holistic approach of marketing as a tool. Now, shortly, if we are to introduce this 4P, that stands for product, price, place, and promotion. Product, it actually answers. So you need to ask yourself, who is actually going to buy your particular product? Who is it intended for? Do you remember the value proposition canvas? So value proposition canvas is another tool. Is a very powerful tool that actually enables you to answer very crucial questions in order to meet the needs and wants of your customers, in order to fit their needs and wants and what you're actually trying to deliver. Who will buy it? Why they will buy it? For what reason they're going to buy it? Who exactly? So here we also need to talk about the customer segmentation. Exactly the reason why each customer segment will buy it, because different customer segments may actually buy the same product for different reasons. In this case, you will have to position the same product, and appeal to different people's to different customer segments emotions. And surely this is about design and packaging. Well, price, it's about, well, that's a tricky question, isn't it? Especially if you are launching a brand new product to the market, and then you're not sure what should be the pricing. In this case, it might be tricky to define what is going to be the price. If it's too expensive, no one will buy it. If it's too cheap, in this case, you're going to lose a lot of revenue. So therefore, we're going to look at different methods of pricing. And therefore, you need to make sure that you do know and you do have a very good and thorough understanding of what your competitors are selling, at what price your competitors are selling a product that is very similar to your product. Okay, how about place? Now, when we say place nowadays, with improvement of internet and so on, we can't say that this is only a physical place. There are, I'm sure you've heard about Amazon, Alibaba. So these companies, or even smaller ones in Kazakhstan, like Lamoda, Wildberries, and so on. So these online platforms are also a good place to sell. Okay, so when we say place, it doesn't necessarily imply a physical place, but it's rather a place where your product or service is sold. So the basic question for place is going to be, where will it be sold? Okay, now promotion. Okay, if your product is brilliant, you know what should be the pricing, you know where to sell it, but no one knows about it. Now, your sales are going to be very low, if not zero. So once you've positioned your product well, once you set up the price, once you know where to sell it, you have to make sure that everyone now gets to know about your product. So in other words, you have to announce about your product. And unfortunately, letting people know just once is just not enough. Okay, and nowadays, it's especially in the online platforms. I'm sure you've heard about the advertisements in Facebook, especially in Instagram, the YouTube. They become so popular nowadays, where the online services actually enable you to target the right advertisement to the right audience, which is very handy, isn't it? Obviously, there are lots of other means and methods of promotion, like TV channels and so on. We're going to look at some examples, but shortly, promotion is about how will you announce and deliver and convey the value that your product or service is actually trying to deliver to your target audience. So that is very important. Okay, good. Let's begin with product. As I've already mentioned, you need to make sure that there is a strategic fit between what your customer wants and needs, and what you're actually trying to deliver. And that's about value proposition canvas that you've already done. Now, unique selling point. Right, so as you can see from the naming, it's unique selling point. So you need to offer, not always, guys, not always, but it's a very additional, it's a very good bonus. It's an additional thing if your product will have something unique to offer, especially if the market is very competitive. Okay, if everyone does it, if there are lots of rival products or rival competitors, in this case, the uniqueness may actually do the work. Okay, but if it's not that competitive, in this case, you may not be so worried about uniqueness. In this case, people just want it, and then you're gonna sell it. Okay. Now, unique selling point is something that is good, but doesn't have to be all the time. Now, unique selling point, let me give you an example. Say that I've seen that quite a lot of students are actually doing like educational centers or something like that. Now, let's say that there are lots of educational centers even in Astana, I believe, and all of them are doing advertising, all of them are having Instagram, all of them having a relatively good service when calling them. All of them have kind of native speakers. All of them have a good, reliable books and textbooks and materials. So your question is, how do I make sure that I'm unique? How do I make sure that I'm actually better? Okay, and in this case, you have to think about that very, very carefully, because it can be unique, but will your customers appreciate it? Okay, so your uniqueness should also be appreciated by the customers, and they should say, well, that's a very cool thing. That's a very unique thing. It doesn't have to be only unique, but it should also be something useful, and surely what customers will gladly be using. Is it capable to stimulate new ones from the consumer? Now, this is quite important. I'm going to give you different examples from my phones, but recurring revenue is sometimes even more important than just just imagine that you've just sold it once to one customer, but what is more important, to sell this one next time to the same customer again, so the customer should come back. Okay, so this is the recurring or reoccurring revenues. So you need to ask yourself, is my product or service can actually stimulate new ones and from the consumer? Now, value for money is something that we call in Russian соотношение цены и качества. Well, it's fairly known like that. It doesn't actually, it's not an exact translation, I believe, but this is the most exact one that we do have. So value for money is about what you're trying to deliver as a value versus how much you're trying to actually charge for it. So if your product is brilliant, but you're charging too much, people may not actually buy it. So therefore, the equilibrium or the ratio between the value, all the characteristics, all the quality, convenience, speed, and so on, all these fancy and value-adding things on one hand, and on the other hand, how painful it is for your customer to pay to you the money. Okay, so it's quite tricky one. Sometimes you may not be able to guess it from one chance, but via trial and error, you may actually find out whether the price that you're trying to charge is actually worth the value that you're trying to deliver. Now, design, performance, reliability, all these things are about this value that we've just told you. Now, I do love this brand, VAG Group. The VAG Group actually owns a lot of brands. Well, Volkswagen, Audi, Fiat, Skoda, even Bentley, Bugatti, Lamborghini, and so on. So all these brands are actually owned by one single company. Now, actually, can we say that Porsche is same as Skoda? Well, we can't. Although there might be some similarities from time to time, but company is very carefully positioning every single brand, and it even came up with a different brand. So company is not selling the Skoda on the Porsche brand, or it doesn't sell the Porsche car under the Skoda brand. It's going to be very odd and very inconvenient, isn't it? So depending on what you're trying to deliver and to whom you're trying to sell, you need to position your products very carefully and trying to deliver the value to your audience. So Porsche, you're going to position it differently. You're going to sell the emotions. You're going to sell the driving experience. Whereas in the Skoda or Volkswagen, for example, you're going to sell it as a very comfortable, very convenient, relatively reliable, not too expensive, okay, car. So they all have different differentiation points, okay. Now, packaging. I'm going to ask you a question. Which chocolate do you think is more expensive? I think most of you will admit that this one is going to be more expensive, isn't it? This is something that is expected. Now, what if I ask you which chocolate is more expensive, this one or that one, without any packaging? You can't guess it, right? You can't say that this is more expensive or this one is cheaper. You can't say that. But can I ask you which one is better? Now, how do you actually define what is better? From product to product, a very ambiguous word, better, varies. So in a chocolate, for instance, you may actually look at the composition, the composition of cacao. So what's the percentage of cacao? Whether you're using some palm oil or not. If you're using it, obviously it's going to be cheaper one. If you're not using it and other ingredients, it's very likely to be more expensive and better. So my point is, from this slide, packaging sometimes can be a defining factor to make a decision. Now, when you go in a shop, in a supermarket, and just trying to buy a chocolate, rarely people will read the composition and actually do know the difference between a good chocolate and a bad one. Okay, so what you will see is going to be the packaging. And therefore, if the packaging is attracting and luring and so on, you're going to say, well, I think this chocolate is very good. How do you know that? Well, packaging. This is how marketing specialists actually try to position even sometimes not a very good product to be a better product. So packaging actually changes the perception of customers. Okay. I'm going to introduce a product life cycle here and then pause it. So there is a concept of product life cycle. So when the product is firstly introduced, we call it an introduction stage. So as the time goes, here we have a very aggressive marketing. So the marketing specialists will advertise it a lot. So after some time, the sales will gradually increase, and then it will grow very aggressively. So as the customers will try it, it will grow aggressively, but then at some point it reaches its peak in maturity, and afterwards the decline is inevitable unless you do a product extension. I'm going to give you an example. Now, what does it mean, a product extension? Okay, I'll just give you an example. Okay, you can read the slide on your own. Now, I didn't give an example of the recent iPhone 11. I was expecting iPhone 12, but it didn't come up. So that's why I'm going to use iPhone 10 and iPhone 10s and iPhone 10s Max. Now, I think people who are technically who are technically familiar with these devices will admit that there isn't a substantial difference between iPhone 10 and iPhone 10s. In fact, there is a very tiny difference. Yes, it has been improved, but not much. Okay. Now, the company, it cannot afford to innovate every single year substantially. So therefore, they actually use these product life extension tricks and actually introduce the extended version, which is iPhone 10s. So I hope that the idea is clear. Okay, I'm going to pause now here, and then we'll continue later on.